Right now, there's this highly sophisticated piece of malware quietly scanning thousands of public code updates on the internet.
Yeah, just waiting.
Exactly. Waiting for a cryptographically signed signal to literally wipe out defense servers across the Middle East. And, I mean, the terrifying part about this, it didn't break down the front door to get there.
Well, it slipped right through the back.
It slipped in through the exact same open source software tools that the world's top artificial intelligence developers just implicitly trust. So welcome to today's deep dive. We have a really fascinating stack of sources for you today.
You really do.
And our mission here is to unpack the incredibly high stakes of the AI industry at this exact moment. Because if you look at the landscape we're pulling from, it paints a picture of a technology that is under siege from quite literally every single angle.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
We're looking at explosive federal court testimonies, terrifying cybersecurity threat analyses, geopolitical summit readouts, and even a quick pulse check on the digital asset markets.
It's essentially a multi-front war right now. And the overarching theme, for you to keep in mind as we navigate these sources today, is that in a world racing toward artificial intelligence, the true battle isn't really about who builds the smartest model anymore.
Right.
The real fight is just about control. It's about who controls the intellectual property, who controls the literal code itself, and ultimately, who controls the physical hardware.
Which is huge. And actually, I want to start with that legal fight for the intellectual property because closing arguments have just wrapped up in federal court in Oakland.
Oh, yeah, the big one.
The big one. We have Elon Musk on one side and Sam Altman along with Microsoft on the other. And the damages Musk is seeking are just staggering. I mean, $150 billion. But, okay, let's unpack this right out of the gate because I was struggling to understand something.
Sure.
From what I'm reading in the sources, Musk doesn't even want this money for himself, right?
Yeah.
He's petitioning for it to be redirected to the OpenAI Foundation.
Yeah.
So what is the actual argument he's making here?
Right. So the core of Musk's argument hinges on this concept of a bait and switch.
Okay.
His narrative is basically that he provided crucial early funding to this organization with the very explicit understanding that it would operate as an open source nonprofit entity dedicated to benefiting humanity, right?
Right. That was the original pitch.
Exactly. But now he is looking at the current landscape where this company operates as a massive closed source commercial juggernaut, heavily entangled with Microsoft, of course. And he's claiming that his foundational contribution was manipulated to build a for-profit empire.
Okay, but if I look at the defense strategy, they seem to be just brushing this off completely. I mean, they pointed out that Musk's initial investment was, what, somewhere around $38 to $44 million?
Yeah, right in that range.
And every single cent of that was entirely spent by the year 2020. So, I mean, if the money he put in was spent 4 years ago, how on earth does he justify asking for $150 billion now?
Well, that is the exact vulnerability the defense is hammering on.
I bet.
Their legal team argues that since the funds were fully expended years ago, on early compute and salaries and things, they couldn't possibly be misused today to generate current profits.
Makes sense.
So they are characterizing this entire lawsuit as just a classic case of sour grapes. The argument is that the plaintiff is simply bitter because a competitor that he failed to control is now succeeding wildly.
Especially when you put it side by side with his own for-profit AI venture, XAI.
Exactly. It's a very bold defense.
It is. And, we should keep in mind that the jury here is only advisory.
Right. The judge makes the final call.
Right. But honestly, the most gripping part of this trial for me wasn't even the billionaire drama. It was the unredacted boardroom documents that came out of Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella's testimony.
Oh, what's fascinating here is how those documents provided a rare, completely unfiltered look into the mechanics of one of the most significant corporate partnerships in modern tech history.
Yeah, they poured $13 billion into this partnership.
$13 billion. And Nadella explicitly stated in an internal email that he took this massive risk to avoid Microsoft becoming, quote, the next IBM.
Wait, let's unpack that. Why IBM? What did he mean by that?
So historically, IBM completely dominated the hardware space, right? But they famously lost their grip on the software revolution to companies like, Microsoft.
Oh, wow. Okay, the irony there.
Exactly. Nadella recognized that AI is the next foundational layer of computing. He saw a scenario where Microsoft could be reduced to just providing the cloud servers.
Like the modern equivalent of hardware.
Exactly, while someone else captured all the value of the AI software layer. But at the same time, he also didn't want this partner to become the new Microsoft and displace them entirely.
Right, because that would just repeat history.
So he described the architecture of their partnership as a one-way door.
Meaning what, exactly? Like, why not just build their own internal AI models from scratch?
Mostly because of the sheer physical and financial infrastructure required. Microsoft made a calculated decision that they could not realistically build two separate supercomputers.
Oh, like one for their internal teams and one for OpenAI.
Right, it's just too expensive. So they effectively outsourced a massive amount of their core intellectual property development. They took on an enormous dependency just to secure the exclusive rights to commercialize those models.
A dependency that they currently project will yield a $92 billion return on that $13 billion investment.
It's an astronomical projection.
It really is. But, I mean, it also explains the paranoia, because I'm looking at these unredacted documents from the 2023 leadership crisis at OpenAI, and Nadella was directly vetoing board members.
Yeah, he was heavily involved.
He personally objected to Diane Greene, the former CEO of Google Cloud, and Bing Gordon, who's a veteran executive with ties to Amazon's board.
Well, he had to, right. When you realize that Microsoft effectively outsourced its future to this entity, it becomes really clear why they guarded that investment so fiercely. They couldn't afford a Google or Amazon loyalist sitting in the very room where the intellectual property was being controlled, so he suggested Sue Desmond-Hellmann instead.
Who ultimately got the seat.
She did. It shows that Microsoft viewed its influence over this board not just as, like, a financial investment, but as an absolute existential necessity for their survival.
Which is wild, because we just spent all this time talking about these titans fighting in broad daylight over who legally controls this AI intellectual property. But here's where it gets really interesting. If you look at our cybersecurity threat analysis, state-level hackers are quietly slipping through the back door to steal the exact same thing. And the way they're doing it is fascinating. Like you said, they aren't kicking down the front door.
Not at all. We are looking at a highly sophisticated supply chain attack here. The attackers deployed a piece of malware dubbed Mini Shai-Hulud.
Creepy name.
Very. And it compromised the devices of 2 OpenAI employees and 1 developer at Mistral AI.
And how they got in is what really caught my eye. The report says they compromised a publishing token in the TanStack continuous integration pipeline.
Yes.
For anyone listening who isn't a software engineer, what exactly does that mean? How does a continuous integration pipeline actually work?
Think of a continuous integration pipeline, or, a CI pipeline, as a highly automated digital assembly line.
Okay.
When developers write new code, they don't just shove it out to the public immediately. They push it to this assembly line, which automatically tests it, builds it, and packages it up.
Right. It does the heavy lifting.
Exactly. And because this pipeline has to do all this heavy lifting, developers give it a massive amount of internal access. It basically holds the keys to the kingdom.
So if I'm picturing this, it's like a massive commercial kitchen. Instead of trying to break into the heavily fortified front gates, these hackers are basically poisoning the water supply upstream.
That's it.
The head chefs implicitly trust the ingredients being brought in through the back door by the prep cooks.
That's a great way to visualize it. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the attackers didn't try to guess a password or, phish an executive. They engineered a path where the TanStack pipeline essentially leaked its own secure publishing token the exact millisecond it was created.
Wow.
Yeah, they exploited a temporary storage cache that the entire development chain just implicitly trusted.
And while no user data or, production systems were actually altered, the attackers did steal internal source code and signing certificates.
Right.
What is a signing certificate, and why did stealing it force everyone using the macOS version of ChatGPT desktop to suddenly have to update their apps?
So a signing certificate is essentially a digital cryptographic ID badge. It proves that a piece of software genuinely came from the original company and hasn't been tampered with.
Okay, got it.
Because the hackers stole those ID badges, the company had to instantly invalidate them. It's like realizing someone copied your master key.
You have to change all the locks immediately.
Exactly. That's why the mandatory update was pushed to all those macOS users.
But the truly terrifying part of this malware isn't even how it gets in. It's what happens when security teams try to kill it. The report outlines this fallback mechanism called fire scale.
Yes, Firescale is just a masterclass in technical resilience. Typically, if cybersecurity defenders locate a piece of malware, they just block its connection to its command and control server.
The server giving it instructions.
Right. But if mini Shai-Hulud loses its connection, it doesn't just die. Instead, it actively scans global GitHub commit messages.
And GitHub's where developers post public updates to their code, right? It's basically like a massive public bulletin board.
Correct. The malware reads through this massive river of public code updates, looking for a hidden alternative server URL. And to make sure it's not being tricked by researchers, it verifies that hidden URL using a 4096-bit RSA key.
Okay, help me understand the scale of that. What is a 4096-bit RSA key?
It is a cryptographic lock of immense complexity. Just to give you an idea, attempting to guess the combination of a 4096-bit RSA key using modern supercomputers would literally take billions of years.
Billions.
Billions. The attackers are using this to mathematically guarantee that the backup instructions the malware finds on GitHub are authentically from them.
It's like a sleeper agent whose earpiece suddenly goes dead.
Uh-huh.
And instead of panicking, they just walk to a newsstand and start reading the classified section of the New York Times, looking for a coded message hidden in plain sight to get their next target.
That's a perfect analogy.
And this malware has a very specific hit list, right?
It does. It aggressively hunts for Amazon Web Services credentials, but it specifically targets 19 availability zones, including the U.S. GovCloud zones.
GovCloud, meaning the servers restricted exclusively for U.S. government agencies and defense contractors.
Exactly. And furthermore, it features a geographic trigger.
Wait, really?
Yeah. If the malware detects that the machine it infected is physically located in Israel or Iran, there is a 1 in 6 chance it activates a destructive protocol, completely wiping all accessible files on that machine.
So this is definitely not a teenager in a basement trying to sell passwords on the dark web. I mean, the Firescale fallback, the military targeting, the destructive geographic triggers. This is a highly targeted intentional operation designed for espionage and sabotage.
It has absolutely all the hallmarks of a state-level operation.
Which perfectly explains why world leaders are treating artificial intelligence as a matter of top-tier national security. I mean, the sheer power of these models and the aggressive lengths state actors will go to steal them brings us directly to the geopolitical stage.
Right.
U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping just concluded a 2-day summit in Beijing. And the result?
Yeah.
They walked away without signing any formal AI governance framework.
The readouts indicate they discussed what were vaguely termed standard guardrails, but they completely failed to produce a signed text, a working group, or even a schedule for a recurring dialogue track.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? If I'm looking at this from the outside, talking about theoretical guardrails feels a bit like political theater when the actual physical hardware powering these models is caught in an incredible gridlock.
Very true.
I'm talking specifically about the physical bottleneck of Nvidia H200 chips.
That physical bottleneck is really the crux of the geopolitical standoff right now. The H200 chips are the absolute gold standard for training advanced AI. They have the massive memory bandwidth required to process these colossal data sets.
Okay.
Now, on paper, Washington cleared about 10 Chinese firms, massive players like Alibaba and Tencent, to purchase up to 75,000 of these chips each. However, practically none of those chips are actually moving.
Because the export licensing regime is basically an impossible bureaucratic obstacle course.
Exactly.
I mean, to actually get a chip shipped, it has to be verified by a U.S. headquartered lab. The buyers have to formally certify it won't be used for the military. And this is the part that blows my mind. The deal requires a 25% revenue share that routes directly through U.S. territory.
Yeah.
Why that specific hurdle? How does a revenue share act as a geopolitical weapon?
This raises an important question because it is the ultimate tool of economic containment.
Yeah.
It isn't just about collecting a tax, you know?
Right.
By forcing a 25% revenue share to route through U.S. jurisdiction, Washington is essentially forcing Chinese tech giants to expose their internal revenue streams and financial structures to U.S. regulators.
Oh, wow.
It adds so much financial friction and requires such a high level of transparency that it makes the transaction politically and economically unpalatable for the buyers.
So the U.S. is approving the sales on paper to look cooperative, but designing the rules so the hardware never actually leaves the warehouse.
Pretty much.
But China has its own leverage here, don't they?
They absolutely do. You really have to look at the other side of the trade equation here.
Right.
China controls a massive portion of the global rare earth metals market.
Yeah.
And these are the raw physical materials absolutely vital for manufacturing these very same chips. Currently, China's rare earth exports remain roughly 50% below their pre-restriction levels, and they did not lift those constraints during this summit.
So we have a complete stalemate. The U.S. is holding back the engine, and China is holding back the steel needed to build the engine.
It's a gridlock.
It makes you wonder, if leaders can't sign a diplomatic agreement, are these severe hardware constraints the only effective form of AI regulation we actually have right now?
The situation really highlights a massive contradiction in policy. The United States is attempting to maintain the lucrative revenue streams and domestic job growth that comes from selling to the massive Chinese market, which, by the way, domestic hardware companies advocate for fiercely.
Right, they want those sales.
Exactly. But simultaneously, they're trying to tightly throttle the technological capabilities of a geopolitical rival. It is essentially containment disguised as commerce.
It is an incredibly tense standoff over centralization. I mean, we've spent this whole time talking about superpowers and tech giants fighting tooth and nail in court, in code, and in Washington to maintain absolute centralized control over artificial intelligence.
Here.
But if you look at the digital asset market right now, you see the exact opposite philosophy playing out in real time.
The contrast is striking. While the traditional tech sector is bogged down by corporate lawsuits and supply chain espionage, the decentralized digital asset market is just running an entirely different race.
Let's look at the numbers. Because right now, Bitcoin is challenging a major resistance level at $82,000.
Huge numbers.
Huge. It is maintaining a very bullish short-term trend, finding solid support by trading consistently above its 50-day exponential moving average.
The 50-day exponential moving average, or EMA.
Right. Let's clarify that for anyone who, doesn't stare at crypto charts all day long. What exactly does it mean to find support above a 50-day EMA?
So a moving average tracks the average price of an asset over time, right? But an exponential moving average gives much more weight to the most recent days. It reacts faster to current sentiment.
Okay, got it.
When we say an asset is finding support above it, imagine the EMA as the floor of a building that is moving up like an elevator. Even if the price jumps up and down inside the elevator car, it isn't breaking through that rising floor. It indicates sustained structural momentum.
And the analysts are pointing out that even though some technical indicators show the market is heavily overbought, meaning it theoretically should cool down, that positive momentum just continues.
Yeah, it's brushing it off.
They're suggesting that as long as that EMA floor holds, any downward fluctuations are going to be strictly limited. It's wild to see traditional tech giants fighting for centralized control over AI, while decentralized Bitcoin quietly tests new all-time highs.
It highlights a fascinating dichotomy for you to consider. In a week that is completely dominated by complex corporate and political risk in the centralized AI space, investors in digital assets are leaning heavily on pure technical momentum.
Right.
They are looking at established, transparent support levels to navigate through all this noise. It is a massive flight toward decentralized systems precisely because the centralized systems are currently at war.
Which brings us to the end of our deep dive today. And what a massive amount of ground we've covered for you. We started in Oakland, dissecting Elon Musk's $150 billion grievance, which really revealed Microsoft's deeply calculated $92 billion projection.
And their intense boardroom maneuvering to ensure their IP wasn't hijacked by a competitor.
Exactly. Then we tracked how state-sponsored hackers built a sleeper agent in the form of the mini Shai-Hulud malware, poisoning the TanStack supply chain and hiding in GitHub commits to target defense infrastructure.
Terrifying stuff.
Truly. And finally, we saw how this all culminates on the global stage, with the U.S. and China locked in a paralyzing standoff, using bureaucratic export licenses and rare earth metals as literal weapons of economic containment.
If there's one critical takeaway from synthesizing all of these sources today, it's that the future of technology is no longer just being built by engineers in a lab.
No, definitely not.
It is being aggressively contested by lawyers, nation-state hackers, and presidents. The digital and physical infrastructure of tomorrow is quite literally a battleground today.
And that brings me back to the idea of security. We spend so much time looking at these massive tech giants and global superpowers, spending billions of dollars building incredibly elaborate legal and geopolitical moats to protect their AI models and hardware from each other.
Right.
But I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. As they build all these massive defenses, what if the ultimate threat to the future of AI doesn't come from a direct competitor or a rival superpower? What if it comes from a single, compromised open source tool buried deep in the code that everyone simply forgot to check?
The loose brick that brings down the entire fortress.
Exactly. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the headlines, keep looking for the hidden mechanics behind the news, and we will see you next time.